to ChangeNOW and this session dedicated to data for good. It is fantastic to be back. My name is Kristen Davis. I'm the former head of IT and innovation for the New York Times International. I'm the founder of Sanxi, and I'm also chair of the board for Apopo Hero Rats. We train rats to save lives. But right now, I'm your moderator for this next session, focusing on data for good. And we're going to be speaking with startups, multinationals, and some of even world-class athletes to hear their perspectives and what we can learn from their experiences. Today, data is a commodity, much like gold, and whether you have it or not determines your position and your power and ability to influence and impact our economies and our societies. Right now, we're thinking about how we can collect and use this rich resource in ways that are beneficial for our planet, but also for us. And we're going to be considering how we can do this, how we can consciously collect and measure the impact and actions of data for good. Is it truly good? To help us explore and even answer these questions, let's meet some of those who are leading the global movement of data for good. Our first speaker, Lou Welgryn, has been an activist and catalyst for change since a very early age. In fact, she was a candidate at the French legislative elections in 2017. Today, Lou works at Carbon4 as a senior carbon analyst, helping companies and investors decarbonize. But Lou is also the co-president of Data for Good, a voluntary position that she's held for the past 4 years. Data for Good gathers more than 2,500 data analysts, scientists, and developers, and other experts. These are all volunteers, and they help general interest organizations that lack the financial or technical resources to impact and scale. The support that Data for Good provides is free and open source. So let's now welcome Lou Welgryn, co-president of Data for Good. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm really pleased to be here today to talk to you about Data for Good. So I've been introduced, but I'm going to say my name again. My name is Lou Welgryn, and I'm the co-president of Data for Good, which is an association, and it's rather fortunate because I'm here to talk to you about what is Data for Good. In 2015, Jeff Hammerbacher, the former data lead of Facebook, said, "The best minds of my generation are thinking about how to make people click on ads, and that sucks." So 7 years later, the best minds of my generation are still thinking about things, and it still sucks sometimes. So today, companies spend billions of euros to develop algorithms to help you know where your friends are all the time, or develop algorithms that will make you look like dinosaurs or unicorns on Zoom. You're lucky because I wanted to show you a picture of me and my mother in this situation, but the slide bugged, so you escaped this performance. And so the question is, this is possible because we're surrounded by data. Every time you take your phone, open an app, your clicks are monitored, analyzed, and in order to optimize your user journey. So the question is, how could we use this data for the greater good? And what does it even mean? Doing data for good means using those best minds of our generation to solve the most urgent problems of our generation, and currently climate change is one of the biggest ones. This means giving associations and general interest actors that lack the technical skills or the financial resources the same means than big tech companies. And so now the question is, how do we do that? At Data for Good, we've decided to do it by building a community of more than 3,000 data scientists, data analysts, developers that will give their free times to participate to general interest projects. And we have 3 pillars. So the first one is purpose. We only help projects that are general interest oriented. Then open data. All the code that we produce is always open source, so we can serve others in the future. And concrete. We built real solutions and not just ideas. So we've helped more than 100 projects through 10 seasons in 7 years of existence. And to explain you a little bit more how it functions, so we're organizing seasons of accelerations twice a year that last 3 months. So basically, we identify projects, which is the most time-consuming part, because we need to help associations understand their needs and understand what they can do with data. Then we will match them with volunteers. So we build teams of 15 to 20 volunteers that will give between 8 to 12 hours of their time per week during 3 months to build the products. And then it's when the magic happens. The volunteers meet with the leaders of the projects, they build the projects, and they present it through a demo day. So to make this way more concrete, I'm going to talk to you about 2 projects that we've helped in the past and that are really impactful for me. The first one is Open Food Facts. So I don't know if some of you know it, but Open Food Facts is basically the food Wikipedia. So it's been built in 2012, and it has granular data about more than 2 billion projects worldwide. And for instance, it's the open database that enabled Yucca to emerge at the beginning. So 2 years ago, they had the crazy idea, after building the Nutri-Score, to try to bring environmental data on food products to citizens. And this is the part where I'm going to test your CO2 knowledge. Does any of you know what's the impact of 1 kilogram of beef in terms of CO2? Nobody. A little bit less, but it's 40 kilograms per kilograms of beef versus 1 kilogram of tomato is around 2 kilos of CO2. So here we see really the importance of having access to the right data to make the right decisions. So we've accompanied this project for 3 seasons, helping them first to build the first eco-score, which is a basic model to compute carbon footprints in partnership with them of 5,000 products. And then over the seasons of accelerations, we've helped them improve their models. So for instance, use computer vision to detect labels on the images, and then build a much more granular scoring system. So I think what's really important on this product is that it has a double ambition. The first one is empower citizens with carbon footprint data to enable them to make the right decisions, and then to put pressure on industrials to make them change their recipes. So for instance, this is an example I took from a Brossard ad, which worked with the Nutri-Scores. So you can see that they're claiming they've changed their recipe from a grade D to a grade C to improve their Nutri-Score. We can hope it will work the same way for the eco-score in the future and help improve products. And the second project I wanted to talk to you about is Pioneer. So I think I wanted to talk to you about it because it shows the diversity of the projects we help. Because on the opposite, Open Food Facts was already a really big association when we joined forces. Pioneer was really the idea of one data scientist that was expert in computer vision. So at the beginning, it was in his daily work, he was basically using his computer vision skills to analyze food and basically distinguish between peas and carrots in your plates. And as we got to talk more and more about wildfires as climate change intensified, he started to get passionate about the subject. And especially, he discovered that the key to reducing the spread of wildfires is the quickness of detection. And so he had the idea to build a model to help detect the start of wildfires. And he pitched the idea at the start of a new season. And in 1 hour, he got 15 volunteers on the project. So I wanted to show you a video because it's always easier to understand with images. But here you can, I know it's not working. I don't know how I can launch the video. No. Okay, so what I wanted to show you was on the left a video where you could see the algorithm starting to detect, oh, it's working. The algorithm starting to detect the wildfires on the left, I think. Yeah, so here you see it's detecting it. And then the images are sent to a platform that will inform firefighters where the wildfire is happening, and then modelizes the potential spread of the wildfire depending on the conditions, the humidity, etc. What I really like about this project is that it really shows how data can resolve real problems on the fields when you're working hand in hand with people that are working on the fields. And what I think also is amazing is that it started with one guy, and today there are 50 persons, and there's it's a real association, and there's 20 prototypes that are being implemented in the south of France. So I could talk to you about lots of other projects, but I don't have time for that. So what I really wanted to share was the main learnings we got from helping those projects. The first learning I wanted to talk about is that sometimes, and really often, identifying problems is harder than finding solutions. So finding projects is really the part that takes the most, that is the most time-consuming. And the more associations are far away from data, the more it takes time to help them understand what they can and cannot do with data, and how it could help them to increase their impacts. So I think there's a real need to raise awareness about these topics. The second thing we've learned is really to not do data for data. So it's really easy to want to find volunteers that fell in love with a new neural network and want to apply it to the problems that we propose to them. But really often, a simple bar chart can drive the same level of action. So it's really, really important to always question the technology you're going to use, and do the pros and cons of the impact versus the time it takes to implement them. And finally, design is really key. So at the beginning, we were just a team of data scientists, and basically our demo days looked like data scientists filming their code for 10 minutes, and the product was the same. So now we're building way more pluridisciplinary teams to really be more product-oriented. And so this is a project we've done for the elections. And you can see it's much more user-oriented. And this also makes that our solutions last much longer in the time. So I've talked a lot about the positive impacts of data and what we can do to use it for good. But I also wanted to take a step back to talk about what data can not do also. So data is just a tool, it's not magic, it's what we do with it that really matters. And we've learned, so this shows first that it's really important to measure the impact you want to have and determine since the beginning the metrics you want to monitor to be sure you've had an impact. But also, some problems just cannot be solved with data. And this we've learned in the hard way. For instance, we've built several projects about conspiracy, trying to prevent conspiracy, and we realized that it's not going to be solved by algorithms. It's a democracy problem, and it has to be solved elsewhere. The second point I really wanted to make was about the fact that nothing is immaterial and digital is really material. So data First of all, it consumes energy to function. It also requires a tremendous amount of materials and metals in order to produce the machines that are going to enable you to use them. And also, and we think about it less, it creates new usages. And so, for instance, companies like Netflix or others would have never been able to live and to exist without data. So it's really, this really brings me to my third point, which is to always question the need and why you're doing a project. I feel in the tech world, it's often easy and an obsession to always want to try to optimize everything, so to try to do the same with less. But the real question is, do we really need this in a desirable and low-carbon economy? So for instance, the question, how can I optimize my advertising model should become, do I really need this advertising model in a low-carbon economy? And if I do really need it, to promote which kind of products? Yeah, this was the final point I wanted to make. To really conclude, we've been existing for 7 years. And on a positive note, I really feel and see there are more and more people that are willing to work, to contribute on the subjects and that are interested by the topic. And I think our personal agenda and our secret ambition as Data for Good is really to make volunteers realize the power of those skills and understand that this on-the-side project that they're working on can become a real all-the-time project. So, for instance, we have a volunteer that's called Bruno that works at Pioneer, and that started working on the project, and he liked it so much that at the end he quit his job, and he became an entrepreneur of general interest. So my last message would be, let's all become Brunos. And yeah, I just wanted also to say that today I'm the one who's on stage, but the association is 100% volunteers. So it could never work without the huge team behind. And especially, I wanted to say a special thanks to Theo Alves de Costa because he's working very well on the association. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lou. Stay there just 1 second. Put your hand up, please, if you're already working in an organization that is doing data for good. Keep your hands up. Put your hands up if you like your organization you're working for to be doing data for good. All right, all you people with your hands up, come and find Lou. Find out how you can get involved with Data for Good. And you. Thank you very much, Lou.
You.
Thank you. Lou, it was great to have you set the scene here for us. And in fact, I think we're already on fire here on the Eiffel stage. Things are warming up. And you talked about, in fact, forest fires, and we're going to be continuing now. Let me introduce the panel for this session, because here at ChangeNOW, we're very solutions-orientated. So we're going to meet some organizations that have founded innovation and innovative ways to use data for good to respond to specific challenges, planetary challenges, nature challenges, economy challenges, waste and society. Please welcome for our panel discussion, Thomas Grübler of OroraTech, Tore Totland, come on up, CEO of Carrot from Norway, and not Hortense Harang, but Laurent Sauveau, who is from WeTradeLocal. And Fleurs, welcome. Take a seat. Right, let me start off by actually introducing you all properly. Thomas of OroraTech, you are the co-founder and CEO. OroraTech is a data intelligence company founded in 2018 that has the mission to create truth for the net zero economy and protect the environment by taking the world's temperature from space. Okay. In January 2022, OroraTech launched the first fleet of 100 thermal infrared sensing nanosatellites, and I'm going to ask you more about that in just a second. Next, we have Totland, who is the CEO from Carrot from Norway. You're a serial entrepreneur with many years' experience as a senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and you have years of experience, in fact, as a mechanical and aerospace engineer, and in the waste and biogas industry, which you say is a sector lacking data. You started a joint venture, private-public, Carrot, with a local waste management company based in Norway. Welcome. And then Laurent Serveau, you're the CTO of WeTradeLocal and Fleurs, based here in Paris, in France. Educated as a software engineer and scientist, you've spent more than 20 years in consumer software with experiences at Apple, and you're a CTO of Zenly, which was part of Snapchat. Okay. Determined to make the best of your experiences, you've now moved over to social and ecological transition. Okay. Welcome, we've got a great panel here. I'm going to go straight to Thomas, though, because I'm a bit of a geek, and I want to find out what a nanosatellite is. Thomas?
What is a nanosatellite? Yeah, we launched the very first one. It's basically a satellite at the size of a shoebook. So our satellites have 6 kilos of weight. So they're super small. They host smartphone and automotive technology. They can take the temperature of the Earth, so they take thermal images, temperature images, and they are actually allowed to do Earth observation cheaper than with local sensors. For example, a ground-based camera, a drone, everything is, our satellites can be cheaper than the solution. And with this, we are changing the world, I hope, expect.
Okay, so you're putting up fleets of nanosatellites up there, and you're collecting data on the planet's temperature.
Exactly.
Okay, so can you tell us how this data is being used and how it's being used for good?
Yeah, so we launched with very first a use case of this data. We also detect forest fires very early, so we analyze the data, and then we send the alert to the firefighters to extinguish the fire. Currently, we have 160 million of hectares under observation, customers mainly in South America, Australia, and Canada, and Africa. And now with our own data, we are improving the fire detection, getting it speedier and speedier, that it also, that really this big impact of wildfires can be reduced, which is currently about 17% of the global carbon emissions.
And when you first set this idea up, did you imagine your data would be used for forest fire detection, prevention, and fighting?
So we started first, to be honest, with building the satellites for thermal detection, and we always had tons of use cases on our list, tons of sectors we can address with the data. But we finally decided that we also need to go into one sector, laser sharp, focus on it, and do the other sectors later. We slowly start now with looking at the other sectors again. But we also saw that in the forest fire sector, we already can give the biggest benefit now today. So with today's data, we already have a benefit for Australia, for South America, and so on. And so other areas need our own data, so we need to first launch the satellites to improve, and therefore we start with forest fires, and we are very happy that, we selected this. At the beginning, I was trying to pitch CO2, and so everyone thought, no one cares. Now, I think we're in the very right position with the same story already 3 years ago. So we did it probably right.
Thank you, Thomas. Let's change sectors and go from space and space tech to something much more down to earth. And in fact, I want to ask the audience another question. So hands up again here. We've heard of circular economy, right? Everyone's heard of that. Who's heard of circular data? Fantastic. Okay, Tori, coming over to you, because circular data is one of the principles that Carrot is based upon. So can you tell us about circular data? What is it and how Carrot is using it?
Very good question. And the circular economy has been talked about a lot, and it's going very slow. And we work in an industry that's lacking data, has been lacking data for a long time, the waste industry. And it's kind of like a black hole missing data, because you're not getting the data before things have become waste. And what we have seen and solving with Carrot is that we're collecting the data before things become waste, so we can incentivize the companies, the users, the decision makers, in a way that we have never been able to do before. And also that you can actually, you get the data that can match the supply and demand for the resources before it's a problem.
And how in Carrot, how did you manage to, did Carrot come first and then circular data? Or was it circular data that you found out about first and then you thought, oh, hang on a second,
well,
we can do something with this?
I think that the industry going into a little bit pay as you throw, understanding that you had to pay for what you're actually throwing away, was a start of Carrot. And then we realized that it's enormous power in the data before things becomes a problem, waste. And we see that that's what we're defining as the circular data, because we can start new circular value chains pretty easily by knowing where things are, who has thrown it out. And that's a necessity for actually to getting the circular economy to succeed.
And just one question for you. How easy was it for you to set up a public-private partnership? That's, for a startup, that's pretty hard, no? How did you get into this?
It was not easy at all. Very difficult, actually.
Did data help?
Data helps, and I think the public company that we worked with realized that, actually they said last week, okay, Carrot is going to take over our jobs, because with the data, we don't need to do what we normally did, which is quite fantastic. So it worked out in the end.
Fantastic. So if you're looking to set up a private public partnership, catch Tori when he comes off the stage. Going to come now over to Laurent down there from Fleurs and WeTradeLocal. Now we're talking about locally sourced produce, locally sourced flowers, something that maybe before COVID, locals, it was nice to have, but not essential. But of course, COVID and now Ukraine have turned supply chains upside down and brought supply chains, in fact, into the spotlight. How has the shift in supply chain focus impacted you at WeTradeLocal and Fleurs d'ici?
So yes, at WeTradeLocal, we are building a platform to address the need of local supply chains, trade channels. Basically, we know that the public wants to consume local and seasonal goods. And the thing is just like, if we want it to be beyond a kind of really local manners, this platform needs to be able to scale. If we want to be able to say, okay, at least 15 or 20% of what is consumed today is coming from local channels, how can we scale properly doing the right things? And COVID has an impact because, as you mentioned, we are WeTradeLocal and Fleurs d'ici, and Fleurs d'ici is the tip of the iceberg. It's products we sell, and it's the one that is displaying a lot of example, a lot of dimension of what we are looking at. Flowers are a good, which is not a good of first necessity, and in COVID it was kind of stopped. So we have to make sure that if people wanted to get flower locally produced, how do we create this channel between producer, florist people, distributor, transporters, and of course, I mean the end consumer. And the main thing is just like, we were very happy because we could see that, I mean, Fleurs d'ici, so, I mean, first, flower is a very complicated product because it's a fresh product, something that's a limited time, and once you cut it, it's kind of 10 days maximum, and we had to transport it, finding local solution and coordinating all this. And we had a 500% jump in growth during COVID. So basically we say, oh, the proof exists that people are looking for such solution, but we need to be able to provide the digital infrastructure so that such solution can exist not only in flower but also in other producers. And we need to make sure, I mean, this is not going into what can be a global supply chain, where basically, if I take it roughly, there may be some supply chain people who will not agree with me, but I believe that a lot of things in supply chain is like we want to reduce costs by simplifying few channel warehouses and only communication between these warehouses. We believe that if we want to create a virtuous ecosystem with a lot of people implied, we need to manage all this graph of data so we can produce a result which is, satisfying for the customer, create an economical good cycle, and also, is having a good impact on the planet. And so we need data to make sure that we're not doing something wrong during this trip.
Okay, that's exactly, in fact, the point I want to come to now. So we've got three very different sectors up here, and it's clear we're starting to understand a little bit about what each of them does, but the true question is, how do you know that you're doing good with your data, and how do you measure and track that? Tori, do you want to take this one first?
Yes, I can do that. In the waste area, it's pretty easy because we know how much waste is thrown out before we come in, and we know how much it's after. So we see we are measuring on the amount of waste and the sorting rate, which has been quite substantial. The average for our customers so far is 20% less waste, and most of that into new circular value chains.
Okay, I love the fact that he integrates data into his response, 20% less. Okay, Thomas, yourself.
That's a quite tough question for us. So at the moment, we track the observed area, like the 160 million hectares of forest. But of course, tracking avoided wildfires is the most complex part ever because they never happened. So how do you say, how big would it be? And we are also now looking into methodologies of creating, into ways of creating a methodology to track avoided wildfires. Because at the end, avoiding the fire is even better than having the fire and planting new trees. So you have the biggest impact in avoiding CO2. Okay. And the next step is then planting trees, and the next step is then active carbon removal. So we need to get this into a methodology that we can really even say it with numbers, and then you even see the business impact of it.
This is it, because you're in effectively the prevention industry. Then
exactly.
It's how do you measure something that your job is to make sure that never happens.
Yeah.
Okay, if anyone has any great ideas, catch up with Thomas after this session.
Reach out to me.
And yourself, Laurent, how do you know that you're doing good with your data?
Well, somehow I would say I know because we still exist after a couple of years. If what we were doing at Fleurs and what we still do today and WeTradeLocal was just like local experiment, we will be dead today. We know that basically when we are selling goods, we need to make sure that we can be at the level of what the customer is waiting. So people want to be delivered, fast, and also they want to have, a promise of delivery. You're going to buy this. They're going to buy seasonal local flower, and they may not get roses. They may get other type of, I must say roses because everybody knows roses, other type of flowers, but they're still going to be satisfied and they continue existing. Behind this, what we do is just like, we are looking at a lot of indicators for data. We're looking about how much does a flower travel, what's the time between the producer and the consumer, how many actors on our platform, do we have enough producer? And the fact that all this ecosystem is living is a proof I would say, that, we're using the data for good. Because if we're going, and that's something that may be sometimes the case when you're dealing with impact, just like you have an idea, you say, oh, I believe this is wrong. And then when you collect the data, you may say, this may not be so wrong. Where do I need to find something else? Or do I need to look like I continue to pretend it's right? And here, we've build the data solution, we've built the use of data in our solution right from the start. We're not looking at it after the fact. We're trying to say, how can we correct every element and little element all the time and in a continuous way so we can make sure that we're doing something good. And I would say the proof is the fact, we still exist and we're growing.
Okay, and I think also today consumers are becoming significantly more data literate than they were in the past as well. So now we're actually going and seeking out the data to understand where our producers come from or how it's reached us and the carbon impact of that also.
Yes, that's very important. Lou was mentioning the Nutri-Score before, because people are getting interested and they want to know where it's produced. We want to do the same, so as I say, for flowers and later on future goods, other goods. But basically, we need to make sure that we can provide, like I would say, full traceability to the customers. So we need to make sure that we can gather all the data all along the chain. And also, it's having another effect, traceability, is also the fact that we're kind of making, okay, we're giving a face, a picture. We're removing anonymization, which where you can get when you're buying to big supply chain. We're making sure, okay, you know it's coming from this producer. You can go and visit her or visit him. And that's something which is very important to us, because then we're going to be able also to attract more and more people to our platform and manage this huge graph of people and make sure that we continue to exist.
Okay. Now, you guys are all out there at the cutting edge, dare I even say the burning or bleeding edge of trying to do data for good, okay? But we know that often in sectors that have existed for decades, centuries even, waste management, supply chain, fighting fires, sometimes industries themselves can be a little bit slow and hard to change, okay? So my question to each of you is, what needs to change in your industry in order to improve the use and the impact of data for good? Tore, tell us about waste and biomanagement.
Yes, we're getting quite a lot of help regulatory from the EU and the world in general that we have to change, which is very positive. But what we see is that circular economy is certainly a team play. No company can do a full circle by themselves. And I think that the openness to change, be open to share data, is the key for this to succeed. And Carrot we have an open platform, we share with everyone, and we're going to try to break down the barriers. But there are, so the large companies that's been here for decades, hopefully will open up.
Do you see, do you feel hopeful about change, this change coming and use of circular data more in waste management, not just in Norway, but around the globe? Are there some countries that are pushing out further faster?
Yes, it's definitely been changing. And last year, we saw a large change, and I think this year is going to be even more. So the large international companies are realizing they have to do it. And it's actually good. If we succeed with the circular data, it's good for everyone, even the large companies, because they get more value in what they're doing.
Okay. And Thomas, how about in your industry? And I guess you're really spanning two industries, space tech and it's forestry management, land management, and fire prevention.
We really need to monetize every hectare of forest on the globe, because otherwise it's cheaper to clear the way and produce something else for biofuels. What else? We need to monetize every energy we spend, every energy that is wasted through gas flares, for example, or in industries with excess heat, when efficient processes are done. We need to get everything monetized, and we need to have a transparent supply chain. We need to know if we get lithium from somewhere else, or even harvest it in a nice region in Germany, where people wear nice dresses and so instead of child work. We need to really understand supply chains at the end, and decide where to do what, and if it's better to do something abroad and we don't see what's going on there.
Okay, and so then you just touched on supply chain, which of course is integral to pretty much every business out there. What needs to change in the supply chain industry? Laura?
I would say that for me, the most important would be the word that Thomas was using, which is transparency. A supply chain is complex, and nobody knows what's behind it. As I was saying, people say, oh, let's order this, let's get it 6 hours or 24 hours after, with no idea what it's traveling. You also don't know how the goods are produced. I would like to the audience, if you get a flower bouquet, how many of you are throwing it in the compost? All of you, well, you better check where it's coming from and don't do it sometimes. You know, if it's not produced in a nice way, and I mean, I would say a good way, then you're going to get a lot of pesticides in your compost, which is not good. So transparency, in my opinion, is a key. And so people and the general public can also understand all the component and the complexity. There is, in all the impact problem, there is you need to have an holistic view and not look at one side of it. And supply chain somehow is the link between all these points, and it forces it to have an holistic view and global view of the problem. What needs to change, in my opinion, is to make sure we provide the transparency to the consumer, and I believe this is going to happen.
That's very interesting, and I think all of us, no matter which sector we're in, we're all consumers. So we can also push for this by seeking more transparency, requesting more transparency to find out where our flowers or anything else that we may be using in our homes, putting into our compost has come from. Tori, you just mentioned actually about the sort of EU policies that are there in place for waste management, and so that's helping your industry change. We've talked about what might need to change in an industry, but are there good policies out there to help us use data for good? We know just as industries sometimes tag a few kilometers behind cutting-edge startups, the policies and laws sometimes are even further behind. So, Tom, I'm going to come to you first out there. Does good policy exist? Does something need to change to help you have more impact on data for good?
I don't think that good policies already exist, because we are very often driven by thinking this or this is bad, and we never get the big picture, and media is also part of it. The big picture is not in the big media papers, in the big newspapers. We need to understand the big picture. On the other hand, we are solving global problems, addressing nearly everyone. Our policies should also include what happens outside of our country in our own doings. We should see everything, and I also think that like for example, the European Commission is in a very good situation to act as an anchor customer, to say, yeah, we are pushing this now, we are pushing these technologies, and then from the European Commission as anchor customer, we're able as a company to go globally and apply this methodology everywhere.
Okay. Would either of you have any thoughts on what may need to improve in policy or law to help you to have more impact in data for good? No?
No, I think that we have the results are set for us, but the understanding of how you're going to get there is a little bit lacking, and I think data and insight will educate the market to reach the goals that's already set regulatory.
Okay, so we have the World Economic Forum and G7 coming up. I hope that they're listening to this panel. We'll maybe act on that. We have just 3 minutes left here, and I'm going to ask each of you a question to see actually what's next for you guys, okay? So over the course of the next, let's keep it tangible, 18 to 24 months, okay? Beyond cash, beyond investment, what do you need that will help you truly dial up the impact of data for good? Laurent.
People, partners. I take again, the presentation of Lou. She was mentioning first, the quote of, I forgot the name, who was at Facebook selling ads. We need engineering resources. We need people who decide, okay, I'm going to put my brain on these topics now. Even if we talk about data, we want to use data, we want to use data for good, we want to collect the data, process the data, store the data. Well, it's very easy to go into a situation where we end up, burning more CO2 managing the data than using it for good. So we need to have people, we need to have engineers for this, and also we need partners. Because as I was saying for us, it's very important that we're not becoming a kind where suddenly we simplify the supply chain. We want to understand the whole complexity and all the actors of the supply chain. So we need partners being part of this, and also partners helping us building those solutions. That's it.
Okay, fantastic. So partners over here. Tore, 1 minute, let's go.
It's a little bit the same. We also need partners, which it's definitely a case. But I think that we need to roll it out to each city, more and more cities, more and more buildings, more and more countries. Because circular data is quite interesting, surprisingly, very interesting. Because now we're getting an insight. We know how much resources should come out of a building, how much should come out of a city, and we can use the insight to actually improve dramatically the way the circular economy is going to work. So we need to just keep growing, keep moving, and get the data.
Thomas, what do you need?
What I need is that, yeah, and that's basically our daily work is education, that there is data, there's data from different sources, and that we can all bring the data together and then create this education, this understanding that you can do it differently. This is the most important part here.
Okay, partners, education. If you want to help out in improving data for good, you heard it right here, what you can do and how you can help. I want to thank you, Tore, Laurent, and also Thomas for being with us, for sharing your data for good experiences from these 3 very different sectors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristen, for the nice panel.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, if you want to hear, if you need proof that data for good is good for business, here we go. We've got 3 startups. They're very businesses of which are founded on the principles of data for good. And if you want to learn more about data for good and business models and key impact indicators, join me at 3 p.m. on the Gaia stage. We're going to be talking about new economic models and indicators. But right now, we're going to stay focused on data and data for good. And having heard from startups and younger organizations, let's now hear from a large multinational and a more established organization that has also adopted the principle and practice of data for good. Please welcome to the stage Victor Gao, Senior VP and Chief Marketing Officer at Arrow Electronics. Welcome, Victor. Please take a seat. Yeah. And Stéphane Houdet. Stéphane is the world-famous French Paralympic gold medalist. Coming up, Stéphane. Take it. Welcome both. This fantastic stage. Let me introduce you properly to our audience here. Victor, you're the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Arrow Electronics. You lead the brand in consumer experience, communications, and corporate social responsibility. Arrow Electronics, if you don't know, it was founded in 1935. It's a provider of global technology products and services, and you employ more than 20,000 people worldwide. Welcome. And Stéphane, the French among the audience may definitely know Stéphane. You started playing tennis well before you had a motorcycle accident in 1996. And you started playing wheelchair tennis in 2005. Today, Stéphane is a triple Paralympic champion with gold medals from, correct me if I get this wrong, Beijing, Rio, and Tokyo. Bravo. Okay, but you also have picked up a silver and bronze in London. Okay, and you're known for having invented a different style of playing wheelchair tennis, the kneeling method, right? Thank you. I'm going to ask you a bit more about that later. Welcome to you both. Welcome here to ChangeNOW. Victor, I want to find out a bit more about how Arrow Electronics is using data for good. You develop solutions that combine the latest technology to make life better for the many. And there's 2 in particular that I want to drill into and find out some more on. Your graduate program, so where you're welcoming in the digital natives, those that kind of breathe data, it's their life and soul. And then the Danny project, which is looking at approaching mobility-related issues in cities, including for wheelchair athletes and users. So can you tell us a bit more about these 2 initiatives, and especially Wheelway and Data Rally?
Yeah, absolutely. First, it's a pleasure to be here. Always happy to be in Paris. So Arrow Electronics, Kristen, as you've mentioned, we're a 77-year-old company, and our capabilities really range from hardware, software, and all the data that travel in between, especially in the cloud. And so we started as a corporation with the idea that if you look at the United Nations, a key stat is 1 in every 7 human beings, 1 in every 7, live with some form of disability. So if you think about in this room, everyone probably has a friend, a family member, or a colleague that's experiencing some form of reduced mobility. And so the tech use case, especially when it comes to data, has to go towards being more inclusive and including instances where folks with reduced mobility can get around. The 2 initiatives that we're introducing this week, one is Wheelway, which if you think about a lot of the urban city centers, they're beautiful. A lot of tourists come around every summer, especially this time of the year in Paris, but they're a little bit harder to navigate. And if you think about the everyday life, when there's a trash bin put in front of a street, it's, suddenly the environment changes. So Wheelway app uses real-time GPS data along with data in the cloud in the edge compute aspects of technology to help folks with reduced mobility navigate around. And it's not just folks with disabilities. It's also think about a grandma. Think about someone that needs a little bit help getting around. The use case is quite broad. And the second is data rally. And when you play at Stéphane's level, it's really, think of it as Formula One driving. Every millisecond, every half a meter, every centimeter matters when it comes to that extra edge to win the sport. And we believe by understanding how athletes perform in a very intense, high endurance, high volatility environment, there's a whole lot of application that could benefit people in everyday life.
Okay, now you'll see that there's a third chair on the stage here. We have someone who was supposed to be with us today, but unfortunately cannot be, and he has a very fine excuse for not being with us. Our other speaker was going to be Danny Caverzaschi. Danny is a professional wheelchair tennis player and actually works with you at Arrow on a number of different things. He's going to tell us about it. Danny is also an economics graduate from the University of Warwick, and he has participated also in the Paralympics in London, Rio, and Tokyo. And he's just qualified for Roland Garros, the French Open here in Paris. So Danny can't be with us. His fine excuse is that he's actually playing the quarterfinals of an important international tournament in Barcelona. But I got to ask him a few questions earlier this week, and we have a video of that conversation with Danny. So let's go and see if we can find the video with Danny. Danny, hi. Thanks for taking time to chat with me. Now that I know that you're just as active off the court as you are on the court, and also that you work with Arrow Electronics, can you tell us why and how you started working with Arrow?
Well, Arrow's been my sponsor since the Rio 2016 games. And then in 2019, that's where it all started. The director of the graduate program, she said, hey, there's a new graduate program with sales and engineers from all over EMEA. Why don't you challenge them with solutions for the wheelchair industry? So I did my research. I spoke with several experts in the field. I made a presentation for them, arguing that there's a lack of innovation. I sort of challenged them also. I remember saying, if someone like Elon Musk were suddenly to become in a wheelchair, have an accident or a disease, and have to use a wheelchair in his everyday life, the wheelchair world would completely transform in a matter of weeks. I gave them a few ideas to apply the existing technology where Arrow is strong in this world, and they just took it to the next level, and we started working. They divided into 4 groups, each working on a solution, and here we are now. But there's 1 billion people in this world with some form of disability. I think it's safe to say about 1 in 20 in society have some form of physical, visible disability. And the reality is that for several reasons, most of these people with disability aren't integrated in society, aren't active. So, of course, it makes all the sense from a CSR perspective. In fact, we've seen in recent years, companies challenging the taboo of mental health issues, race, gender, diversity. Why not disability? Companies still think it's the minority, but it's not. There's a lot of people with disability in society. There's a negative stereotype surrounding disability. It still happens too often, like I'm wheeling around the streets and someone looks at me with pity. Or an old lady comes up to me and grabs me by the cheek and says, oh, poor little thing. And there really is a general sense that there's nothing worse than being in a wheelchair or having a type of disability. And for me, I laugh. The lady that grabs me by the cheek, I tell her, ma'am, don't worry, I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. I've been lucky to have a family that has always normalized disability from the beginning. I'm a Paralympian, so I think in the Paralympic world, we're an exception. Disability doesn't really enter the equation of our lives. But a lot of people haven't been lucky like this, in this sense. And a lot of people end up believing the stereotype and end up living a life where they don't integrate, where they don't accept themselves, accept their differences. So this is an issue that I've tried to tackle from my side. I have a hashtag. You can't really translate it in English. It's vale la pierna. Around this hashtag, I try to use a touch of humor to normalize disability. And not just disability. In the end, all of us have disabilities, but mine is physical and it's visible. So I try to challenge the social stereotype, the stigma surrounding these differences.
Danny, thanks so much. I know how busy you are. You've got to get back to your tournament.
Thanks a lot, Kristen. See you. Bye, guys.
And of course, we wish Danny all the best in his tournament and Roland Garros. Stéphane, over to you. I think in there we saw a clip of you playing tennis with Danny, right? You guys are friends, and I understand that you share a dream. Can you tell us your shared dream?
Well, I'm living next door, and this is the first time I see the Eiffel Tower. from this perspective, and I'm very, very happy to be on stage with you. With Danny, we had a dream, which is something we share for so many years, and this is also something I saw when I just came in. I presented my gold medal from Tokyo in a special room, and just below it's written Olympic Committee, and this is something we're arguing all the time, because these medals, these games belong to the Paralympic Committee. And Danny and I, we don't want this anymore. We want to share different sports and our sports. If you want to sit in a chair, just play with us. We don't want to go with how much differences we can have and just play together. So that's our dream.
I love this dream, and I'm a big fan of the Olympics and the Paralympics. I'd love to see them combined and some of those barriers come down. And talking about barriers, now we know that anyone that lives in a city, able-bodied or with mobility issues, they struggle. Cities are not friendly places, okay? But you have a foundation, you created a foundation to tackle this issue, to focus on autonomy, accessibility. Can you tell us a bit about your foundation, Stéphane?
Well, I decided after the games in Tokyo to be engaged in the foundation. I didn't create it, but thanks to a company running this foundation, we want to go with that philosophy to change now the world and being a citizen and also a customer. We think that if we, everything we created, like the phone, gave us opportunities to solve an accessibility problem, and now everyone is using the voice to text. And the remote was first made to change the channels from someone who was sitting in a bed as a tetraplegic, couldn't change the channels. They created the remote, and now everyone is using it. So this is the way also, when we met with Victor, Arrow is thinking, changing the world with technology that is going to matter first for someone who's really in need, but it's going to be useful for everyone else. So that's a philosophy we share.
Okay, and I'm going to come back to Victor in just a second there, but you didn't tell us the name of your foundation.
Oh, sorry, that's the Andy Lab, and my dream is to erase Andy, and it becomes the lab.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So grab your phones, look that up right now so that you can understand more about Stéphane's foundation. We've got the Olympics coming right here to Paris in just 2 years' time. Stéphane, how can sport and events like the Olympics and the Paralympics help improve accessibility in cities for those that have mobility issues?
Well, that's really the challenge. And don't look at your phone now, because we are developing the website right now.
Just make mental note of it.
It's going
Sorry,
to be ready
thank you.
in 1 month. Yeah, the challenge is accessibility, and obviously with a city as nice as Paris, but as old also as Paris, this is a huge challenge. And probably that's the one. But tools like the one Arrow is developing with Danny, could be also an asset for the future. We need to have everyone being able to come to play, but also to come to watch. So that's the challenge for Paris and for the world.
And this is it, and I think as Danny said in his videos, one in 7 that have mobility issues. But in fact, when you think about the community that also supports those people, it's a much higher number, a much more significant number. I have a question to both of you, okay? We've talked a lot about data for good, some of the things that are already happening. But what data are we missing? Or what data needs to be improved to help us bring about significant improvements for those with mobility issues? Victor, do you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to start. A lot of when you look at a real life setting, the speed of that data is very important. So think about someone that's trying to cross the street. There's a cart that suddenly shows up. There's a child that suddenly runs across, or a ball bounces out. So from us, it's a lot of the data that could be preloaded or could be set the environment to reduce that calculation speed. And so when it comes down to, I think one of the former previous speakers said, it's how to use the minimum amount of data to get to what you need. And it's not just a matter of carbon footprint, it's also a matter of speed. So thinking small data, thinking fast data is crucial for success.
So speed of data. Stéphane, how about yourself?
Well, Lou said just before with data for good, data is just a tool. So when we have a project, we need to define the goals. And Victor said also about wheelchair tennis, it's a combination of Formula One, because we need to be very fast, and tennis. So that's where we're using all the data to make sure we can improve our chair, our sport, our game, but also everyday life. And for example, what I did with the kneeling chair that I'm using, we developed also wheels that are very, very light, which is perfect for tennis, but which is also very useful for someone who's going to move from the wheelchair into the car, has to take the wheels, put them into the car, and same with the frame of the chair. So I go back to what Lou was saying, but data is a tool that we're going to use for life.
Definitely. I think I'm probably going to get Lou's quote wrong, but it was something along the lines of data isn't magic, it's how you use it that matters. Okay, so speed of data over here, but then also, yeah, how we use it, be it for I love your story about actually the weight of the wheels. I was struggling around Paris a while back, actually, and noticing how people with pushchairs even were struggling. So it's you know, there's many of us can be impacted out there. And so I went out and actually looked out for information and data on pavement access. Where is it easy to get in and out if you have a pushchair? And I couldn't actually find any data on that. Maybe it exists since I last looked. But there are clearly some things that we can do with data to help improve access, autonomy, and mobility. I want to come to the question now about how do we normalize disability, okay? Danny talked about this, and this is some of the work that you're both doing at Arrow and through your foundation. So what approaches to increasing awareness and inclusion have you seen in your worlds of business and sport that work well, that we can share with others? What solutions that work well we can share with others? So from the world of business, Victor, what have you seen that has helped normalize disability in business?
Yeah, I would say we couldn't agree and emphasize more with what Stéphane and Danny have been talking about. A huge part of this is actually the societal reception and mental independence that some of this technology will help engender. What we've seen that really work is, first of all, it's not a technology company or a community working with the disabled community as a recipient. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's very much a genuine partnership. As we develop this technology, for example, with Danny, he was a key part of providing us input, giving us ideas, we're co-creators of this technology. So from the beginning, that agency is very important, because the use case, how it will actually be able to help someone in that situation. That's the first thing we would say. And the second is, I think, an open source approach. So the technology that we are developing with Wheelway and Open Data Rally is very much about inviting other innovators. So if you think of the stereotype of what an innovator looks like, it is not someone in the basement working late at night. It is often a team in the basement working late at night or working around the world. And so we believe that sort of open source approach, inviting partners to join, is going to be crucial in bringing diverse orthogonal thinking into the space.
Okay. Stéphane, great examples of things that have worked well to help normalize disability.
Well, I think, as you said, using as a parent a trolley to go everywhere is a good example, because no one is going to dream of being a Paralympian or to have a child who's a Paralympian, not even a Paralympian champion. So sport has always been used as a way to communicate with each other, and I think we have something to do with sport that we can, I made this code which is play together, and being all together. So I think sport is a good way to understand the way someone who's different can be better than you.
Fantastic. Play together, play together. Okay, noting that one. Now, Victor, what would you say to other large organizations like Arrow out there that are maybe thinking about how they can apply their years of data, their huge data lakes, and their years of experience to doing better data for good? Clearly, there's a huge market out there. Based on your experience, what would you say to them? What nugget of advice would you give to large organizations?
I would say think like a startup. There's a lot that big companies can learn from startups, and quite frankly, vice versa. In this particular case, scale in many ways dehumanizes, right? When you look at a large number, everything becomes just part of that statistic. And starting with organizations that really are focused on people, focused on individual lives, and using that, co-creating with a community that is real, that is in a real life situation, could help you understand the multiple aspects of what it means. That's what I would recommend to other companies.
Okay, we have just a few seconds left. I believe we actually have a video of a wheelware short movie. Let's take a look at what you were just talking about.
Je suis Danny Caverzaschi, joueur de tennis professionnel. Je peux faire ça, et aussi ça. Mais parfois c'est dur, trop dur. La technologie me change la vie. C'est pour ça que je travaille avec Arrow Electronics pour développer Wheelway. Wheelway utilise des données en temps réel et l'intelligence artificielle pour trouver le meilleur itinéraire partout où je veux aller. Je fais la course en tête, toujours devant.
So thank you very much to Danny. We wish him well in his tournament. Thank you very much to you, Stéphane, Houdet, and to Victor Gao. It's been a pleasure having you with us here today. Thank you so much. And now I hope that what we've seen and heard here on the stage today will inspire you and other organizations to go out and think about how you can use data for good. I want to thank everyone who has joined in this session here today. And as I say, if you want to hear about business models and data for good, you can join me on the Gaia stage at 3 p.m. But for now, thank you very much.